How does this strange chord progression somehow make sense? Winchell's footprint has one of the most confusing turnaround in jazz harmony. Today I'll show you a theory that might just explain it using a forgotten theory from a 1960s theory book, and how I myself make sense with it. When I was in a private percussion lesson back in university, my teacher suddenly said something like, "I've no idea how Winchell music works. I really hope someone can explain that to me." Now, this teacher is a solid jazz vibraphonist. So I remember thinking, if someone as good as him finds it confusing, then Winchell's music must be very abstract. But I was also a little cocky. Like, how hard could it be? I'll check it out later. Of course, I never did. Fast forward 4 years, I was jamming with friends, and we played footprints. After one round, we stopped and discussed the form. That's when I remembered what my teacher said. Yeah, that middle turnaround is weird. After the jam, I tried to look up any harmonic explanations. I did found a few. Adam Neely once called Wayne Shorter a jazz impressionist. The chords are more about colors than function. And I was ready to leave it at that. But then something clicked. What if I look at the piece using Vincent Persichetti idea of chord movement by seconds and thirds instead of fifths? If you haven't watched my video on the cycle of thirds and seconds, I recommend checking that out first because I'll be using a lot of concepts from there. But here's a quick summary. In traditional functional harmony, progressions follow a roadmap based on the circle of fifths. In C major, that might look like this. Persichetti suggests that notes can also be arranged in seconds and thirds. And if we apply the same roadmap logic, we end up with two new harmonic maps. Roman numerals in these maps don't dictate chord quality, because Persichetti notes these cycles can be used in any scales. That means the chords are not limited to diatonic functions. You can borrow freely from parallel keys, relative modes, modal interchange, and so on. Now let's apply this theory to footprints. The tune is a 12-bar blues doubled to a 24-bar form. The first 4 lines follow classic 1/4 blues movement, so I'll focus on the 5th line. I'm using the Real Book 6th edition, which gives these chords: F sharp minor 7 flat 5, F7 sharp 11, E7 flat 5 sharp 9, and A7 flat 5 sharp 9. That first chord, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, is sharp 4 half diminished. It's not diatonic in C minor, but it's not unheard of in other jazz standards. It often acts as a tension builder before the dominant 7, which is the 5/7, but instead of going to G7, it moves down to F7 sharp 11. Some versions use B7 or B alter here instead of F7. That would make sense because F sharp to B is a 2/5 itself, and F7 can be seen as a tritone sub for B7. Now let's look at the rest. F7 sharp 11, E7 flat 5 sharp 9, A7 flat 5 sharp 9. That's a lot of extension. For simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna call the name by the root and the 7th. So if you just look at the root, these are 4, 3, and 6. Clearly, E7 and A7 don't belong to C minor, so we can treat them as borrowed chords. Still, something feels off. This progression feels like it's heading towards D. But it resolved to C minor. Now let's bring in Persichetti cycle of thirds. 4, 3, 6 in that cycle is equivalent to 7, 5, 4 in the cycle of fifths. Just like most blues turnaround, it goes backward from 5 to 4. Here you can also see that happening in the cycle of thirds. Let's test this. So what they have here, I would say these are the chords for cycle of thirds. And I'll put the chords for the cycle of fifths. So F7 we know already. It could be a B7. Is B7 also the 7th in the cycle of fifths? And E7, look at the graph, look at the roadmap, it'll turn into G7, which is 5. And A7 can turn into F7, which is a 4. Minor tweaks were needed to fit the melody. For the G7, you can just copy the exact same chord from E7. So you can make it a G7 flat 5 sharp 9. coincidentally, the melody note for that is a B flat, which is the sharp 9 of G, which is perfect. But then for F7, since the melody note is C and G, we might as well just leave the chord as F7 without adding all the extensions. You'll hear that it flows logically, but the original version, based on the cycle of thirds, adds extra flavor and richness, and that's how I interpret footprints using Persichetti's framework. Did Wayne Shorter intentionally write using the cycle of thirds? 20th Century Harmony was published in 1961. Footprints came out in 1966. Maybe he read the book and got inspired. Maybe he didn't. But that's not the point. Whether or not this was his intention, this is just one way of analyzing the tune. This is just my little observation. And there are other interpretations out there that make just as much sense. What matters most here is that we can all appreciate Wayne Shorter's unique harmonic language, each in our own way. I also composed a short piece inspired by this theory and Footprints chord progression. If you're curious, you can also check out that video of me analyzing that piece. Let me know what you think about this approach to footprints in the comment section. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram for more updates. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.